So.
All right, Jesus, take it away.
Okay, first question. Tell us about Latino Outdoors.
Yeah, so this idea of Latino Outdoors, it's interesting, right? Because it kind of occupies this middle space between how different people let this identity occupy. There's so many terms in how people refer to themselves, whether they choose to identify with Hispano, Hispanic, Latino, Latinx, Latine, even Chicano, which is what I identify as. And the idea really was, what does it mean to relate to that? Either because you're born here in the U.S. and you have that type of heritage or ancestry, or you're an immigrant from Mexico like myself, and you like outdoorsy stuff and there is a connection to the land, but maybe you also get into hiking and camping and backpacking in a way that's new and different. And so for me, it was that space to say, are there others that like this as well? Even as sometimes we face the questions, even from our parents, we're saying like, why do you want to do that? Why do you want to go and sleep on the floor for multiple days out there? Or other people, they can presume, oh, that's not what we do. That's what others do. And so for me, it was a space to be able to say, well, this is a way that we can do it too.
Okay, what suggestions do you have for Mexican Americans and Latinos on spending more time outdoors?
Well, I mean, I feel like the easy answer is just get out there. However, I know that it's not always as easy as just getting out there because sometimes there might be usual barriers, like maybe you just don't know where to go, what's available. You don't know if like you need to buy particular gear to do a couple of things. But I think really the most common question that we would get in taking families outdoors was, where is it? Right? Where and what is it? How do you get there? And then what do you do? So I think answering those questions or being able to ask others, because sometimes you don't know that you have like a really amazing park nearby. Right there on the peninsula, a lot of families didn't know that you could hike up and there's like redwoods up on the ridge. That there's places that aren't as full as like the city parks. And so I think for me, it's just being able to ask, investigate, try it out, and then tell others.
Okay, all right, let's go back to high school. Tell
Mhm.
us about your freshman year because all we know is distance learning.
Ooh, great question. That is, oh yeah. I mean, when you put it that way, when all you know is distance learning. So for me, high school, wow. I mean, high school, I remember being so nervous for photo day because it would, it's like the first orientation. You were going to go, at that time, it was like, you're going to go, you're going to get your class schedule, you're going to get your books, you're going to take the picture for your ID card. It was like this whole process during the day. And I just remember being both so nervous and excited. And obviously this was way back then when it was in person, and this was still the very early days of the internet. So I just remember that, and then having no idea what the next 4 years really were going to end up being like.
All right, who was one of your role models in high school?
That's a good question. I had several, but I think two of them in terms of, I'll put it this way: there was that role model in high school, like that was at the high school, like a teacher, and then there's a role model kind of outside of that. And in terms of in the school, I was lucky that I had a lot of really good teachers. But one of the ones that I really appreciated was my art teacher. Part of that was because he, in a way, he was this self-identified old hippie that did art. He played music. Like he did all this other stuff that I didn't really find out until later. But the fact that he really encouraged me in terms of my art, in terms of drawing, in terms of saying, if this is interest, you keep doing it. He also ended up being the advisor for like the school environmental club. So I think there was like a lot of ways in which I didn't know it at the time, but I probably saw a little bit of myself reflected much, much, much later. And right immediately out of high school, I think a role model at that time was I was still trying to out right, like who are these far away individuals like González and Lorista in my what I kind of knew as characters and not as people much later on. But I think I had this idea of a role model of saying there's somebody out there like of this historical importance. And I think I like just ended up combining a bunch of those people into an idea.
Okay, did you play any sports and or did you have any other interests and activities?
Yeah, so in high school, I actually did soccer, but not through the school. It was kind of extramural, is that right? Extracurricular in that sense. And I remember loving it and also not liking it because there was a lot of running, and that was not something I was into. But I did a lot of that in high school, and then that's also when I started playing music, like it's a grupo. It kind of translated into band in English, but it's not quite the same. It's un grupo. So you do a lot of the Mexican cover songs. You play the quinceañeras, you play the bodas, the bautizos, that kind of stuff. I started with the cowbell, and then I also did accordion. So that was that kind of thing. And then later in college, I did floor hockey.
Okay. So now Mateo is going to ask you the questions.
Thank you, Estes. I'll take it from here. Um, which is your favorite Liga MX team, or what is your favorite sports team?
Oh, that's always a hard question. This was so. I admit I always I didn't do a good job of getting into sports, and the only reason I stayed on top of it was because my brother was really into it. But it was this kind of funny thing in the family that dad was pro Chivas, and no, dad was pro America, and mom was pro Chivas, and then my brother was like pro Cruz Azul. So we were all over the place, and I feel it was just easy to root for all of them, which I know is kind of a bit of a cop out, but it was a way that I got to kind of be in the middle of the rivalry.
My family's the same way. We all have different teams. What can Mexican Americans do to get better representation in politics?
Yeah, I mean, you got your three pieces. If you're able to run for office, do it. Like, there's no better way to engage in that than to start at whatever level, whether it's at your local school district, city council. Like, there's so many ways that I think people don't think about doing that because they usually think it's like you got to run for big offices. Second is it's like kind of inform yourself. Be able to ask the question: does this matter to you? Do parks matter to you? Does sports matter to you? Does the school system matter to you? And then get that information. And the third one, of course, is then vote. Be able to support candidates that you feel do represent you. Ideally, they'll also, it's kind of like saying it shouldn't be automatic that they have to look like us to represent us, porque a veces, unfortunately, they don't. So it's being able to say, but can you represent me in what is important to me in my community? And I think that's a big one.
Tell us about your art. Will you be selling items other than t-shirts?
Yeah, fun. I noticed you went to look at the website. Great. Hopefully soon. I have sold things, way back in the early days on Etsy, and then through other ways. I have prints because I've done screen prints, so silk screening, both in terms of also some photography prints with some artwork that I do, watercolors and the like. So yeah, so hopefully, fingers crossed, more of that will come.
What is next for your career?
Yeah, that's the big question. Goodness, I wasn't sure I was going to get some of the harder questions. Um, well, I think this year and next, I get to decide what I want to do next, which is exciting because I know for some people, you don't get a lot of times to decide that, right? You might feel like I start working here and then this is what I do for the next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. So I'm weighing 2 to 3 options. One of them is to kind of jump back into public service, kind of like, work for government at some level, because I do care about that being like a useful tool to help our community. Second is I can choose to keep doing what I do right now, which means that I'm fully in control of my schedule. I get to decide what I can work on and don't work on and how to spend that time. And so that's exciting to me in that front. And then the last one would be that I would agree to join a different organization and kind of help that grow and work in that capacity. So this is kind of my next jump over 5 years to decide how do I want to spend, in some idea those next few years of my life.
Final question. What is your message to Mexican American and Latino students on pursuing their dreams?
Oh, that's a great question. I'll say three pieces. First, there's the classic kind of phrase, si se puede, right? It's like, si se puede. And then I add the parts like, pero hazlo, but you got to do it. And so for me, that's important because sometimes it's hard for us to just visualize what is possible, right? For different reasons. I didn't have an idea what was possible because my parents are immigrants. The most they accomplished was early education. I was the first in my family to go to college. I was the oldest of 9. So I didn't have a solid picture of what it could look like that I could accomplish until I started doing it. Right. So I think the more that we can help each other ask those questions or think what could be possible. And the second is the doing it, porque a veces like we just, take your reasons también that we end up like not pursuing, taking that risk, that step, right? It's kind of like the old stand and deliver line. You gotta have ganas. You gotta be able to say, can I do this? And then lastly, I think there's this sense of orgullo, right? Of pride. Like, what does it mean for you to want to own these aspects of your identity? And for me, what that has meant is, like mi cultura in terms of what I want and what I would want moving forward is going to be different than my parents and their parents. Part of it is just because we're here, but part of it is also like, because there's parts of the culture that I don't need in the same way that affected them. Like my dad wasn't a great role model to me in terms of like, what does it mean to be a man with like positive, healthy outlook that didn't depend on having to say, the best I can offer is just immediate economic support for my family. And I said, so I got to give him credit for that. And I'm saying, here's the way that I can model what does it look like to represent being a man differently while still being proud of what does it mean to be proud of being born in Mexico, to be proud of identifying as a Chicano, to be proud of a Mexican heritage, Mexican American heritage, to like own how I can choose to define this idea of being a Latino.
Thank you for taking your time out to join us today. We will be following you and other notable Mexican Americans in the future. Thank you.
Placer, gracias.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all. Unfortunately,